Okay, before the break, we were taking our first preview of this, and this week I'm still going kind of slow. I like to, I found I like to do that. Start off the lectures kind of slow. They will accelerate, but y'all may have noticed I'm easily distracted. So I like to, at least the first week and a half, go kind of slow so you get used to me following along the examples before we get in too in depth. So we looked at some colors. There is a slight issue with the colors. If I share my screen, that might be kind of hard to see. Those on the Zoom call probably can't see what the point. But if I hold this up here, so the people in the room can see this next to the monitors in the room, the colors on my laptop aren't the same as on that TV, right? Those are pretty close. Some of them get very drastic. If I went back to that lime color that was typed in there at one point, I think that one will be very drastic. Let me see. Oh, wait. The inline one is the last override, so this one. Lime green. Save that, reload it. And the people here in the class can probably confirm that there's a big difference between my monitor and the TV. Yeah, so named colors are not consistent, which can be a big problem because a lot of companies, or other things you might make websites for, a lot of companies have custom colors. If it's like a sports team, people will get very defensive if you use the wrong color. And you might have used one that looks like the team color on your computer, but you give it to the client and it's not the team's color. People get very defensive about that one, about their favorite sports team. So named colors aren't really the best way to do that. I'm changing that back to violet just because I was going to ignore that, but lime green and red is not a good combination. Violet and red's not a good combination either, but it doesn't hurt my eyes quite as bad as that last one.
I was gonna say lime green and red's better than that because you can see it much more contrasting.
Contrast is important. We'll talk about that. Lime green. I'll switch. Yeah, because we're just randomly doing colors. Our class examples, we're going to see the random properties and then try to make sure there's time every day for y'all to spend half an hour, 45 minutes at least mixing around, playing around with those. Try something, undo it, redo it, change it around a little, combine them in different orders than we see in class, see things like that. But with colors, we can put it on color box. We're going to spend a lot of time on colors. There's actually a whole lot of colors. RGB and HSV. For now, to start with, let's just start with the basic name colors or the more precise one. We would get a lot more control over that computer if we kind of reached in to the could reach into the machine and actually flip those switches, right? Those ones and zeros represent on and off switches. If we could control exactly how much there is going, how much is there, or how much is missing, then we'd have a lot more control. So really what it'd be nice to do is type our colors in binary, which we can do. Hexadecimal. Binary is too simple for the human mind, so to work with it, we made it a little more complicated. We use base 16, which is really base 2 squared. So it's 2's all the way up, so binary perfectly lines up with it. It's closer to the numbers that we can easily deal with, and we just need a few more symbols.
I wouldn't say it's more simple, it's short. Binary is longer, which is the issue.
Which
makes it short.
Like we usually do with 10.
Yeah.
Right. So we're used to using 10 numbers. So 16 is a lot closer to 10 than 2 is. It's only 6 away instead of 8. Or think about counting on your fingers. If you include fingers and toes, you get past 16 pretty quickly. but two is very simple. So really what hexadecimal is we're working with binary 4 bits at a time. If you haven't seen it before, we can use any number we want for the basis of our system. You'll see it in some future class, but we have different numbers to symbol, and they're numbers. So 0 through 9 are obvious. That's easy, but then we need a few more symbols. So we need 16 symbols for base 16 or hexadecimal. So the most logical ones to use are the first few letters of the alphabet. A is 10, which you can still count on your fingers. I'll do this when we can. Turn my camera off for this one. I always go right 0 through 9. That's normal like fingers. My new laptop has a thing on it. So 0 through 9, and then when we get to 10, that's A. So like A, B, C, D, E, F. Will give us those 16 symbols to do that. I still count it on my fingers. So 10 is A. Just remember 10 is A, and you count it out. But for starting, you're probably just gonna go copy those from somewhere anyway. So maybe we want something that's kind of yellowish for the paragraph. So I do background color. And this is different than what you would have learned in elementary school. I need to erase the board. I probably should have done that during the break. Let me draw a quick picture up here about colors. Because way back in elementary school, everybody kind of learns the same thing about mixing colors, right? And it doesn't seem to apply on computers. It's because there's two different things that happen. Since we're in a school setting, we might as well go over the details of what's going on. Right? Here's us. Draw some eyes. That's the important part here. Looking at something. And there's some sort of light source. Maybe not the sun. Just do a light bulb. So we're like in a room looking at something, maybe a little table somewhere, and have a picture on the table. When we see that, the light from the source comes down, hits that thing. Some of the light's absorbed, some of it's reflected, but an altered version of that light comes back to our eyes, and that's what we process. We actually see what's missing. So I use green. So maybe all the colors of the rainbow come down and hit that thing, and it absorbs all the green light. So everything except green gets reflected, and our eyes pick up what's missing. Another way we could see things is we could pick up that source light directly. Let me do a color. This is a black, altered, so that it's not just pure white, right? Tinted light bulbs, those are pretty common. See those all the time. Christmas lights or something. We could just pick up that light directly. And when we do that, we see what's present instead of what's missing. So our eyes work in two different ways. And way back in elementary school, the reflected light is what you learned. They would have told you red, yellow, and blue, but it's magenta, yellow, and cyan. And since we usually learn that in like first grade, kindergarten, first grade or something, they don't expect kids to know words like magenta and cyan. So they tell us red, yellow, and blue. So when we see reflected light, the missing part, it's a mix of these three colors. And when we see source light, it's a mix of red, green, and blue. Just in case you've never heard the discrepancy there. So if your eyes are perceiving the missing color, we're mixing magenta, yellow, and cyan. If your eyes are perceiving the color that is there directly from the source, such as an LED screen, or if you've got a few extra dollars, an OLED screen, so it doesn't hurt your eyes as bad over periods of time. just an LED with carbon worked into it, so it's natural, like staring at nature for a while. Much more suited for our eyes. We see the light directly, it's a mix of red, green, and blue. Just in case you've, I feel confident everybody's probably encountered that discrepancy before, but might not have known what that discrepancy is.
What does that mean for colorblind? Do they see differently from?
The mixes are, the wavelengths are different. So,
Like, as if, like somebody who's colorblind to a certain, like red, green, or whatever, would they see a source differently from a reflected then?
it's still the same colors mixing, so that comes in with inside of the eyeball. I draw a really big eyeball here. We have rods and cones, right? Rods are actually cylinders.
Each one's responsible for different wavelengths.
Cones are like this. So when they pick up the different wavelengths. So maybe something like that. But maybe your cone, for some reason, grew like this, and it suddenly got real sharp, which they do. Like all of us have thousands of cones that are like that perfect cone shape, and thousands of cones that would be like this. But when it's uneven, you miss some.
But that
You miss some frequencies, or maybe yeah, they're not perfectly. So maybe most people pick up with a rod that looks some bulges out in the middle, or bulges inward in the middle, and enough of them grew with that slight variation that the bulge is different. So then they're missing the part, they're missing the receptor for a specific frequency.
But I was just wondering if, because of that discrepancy, there would be a difference for somebody who receives, who has that.
It still makes it the same thing.
Yeah.
What is getting picked up.
It's magenta, yellow, cyan versus red, green, blue. I didn't know if that would, with somebody who's got different color perception, if they would see a difference between a source and a reflection because of that difference of.
No, they still see it the same as us. They just their colors they blend differently. So
I know, like I've seen what that. I was just curious if the source versus magenta wound up being wonky then. Because of the different wavelengths being reflected in that different versus what's projected. You know what I mean? Like
possibly, but not maybe not across the board. Because yeah, color blindness is also different for every single person. Mm-hmm. They categorize it, but it's a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And people fill in every spectrum along the way. Some people are colorblind and have no idea because they have enough to distinguish those separations. Yeah, and just kind of miss some of that. But we want to mix, obviously we're on a screen, so we want to do that red, green, and blue mix, which you all probably already knew. To enter a code, and this is the one that works in any programming language, right? Because this is directly to putting our color in binary. We'll enter £, hash key, whatever you want to call that symbol, number sign, lots of different hashtag, lots of names for that symbol. But the thing about the 3, and then we need 2 digits for red, 2 hexadecimal digits for green, and 2 hexadecimal digits for blue. So B2 quite a bit of red, a little bit less blue, less green, maybe 88, and just a little bit of blue should give us something yellowish, brownish. Reload that.
So it's different than the color charts.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So we will see some ways in a couple of weeks where we can use those that are more intuitive, some things that are closer to mixing that. But red and green give us yellow. Best week 12 and that 98 or whatever I had typed there. Lots of red, lots of blue gives us purple. You would have expected that one, but they're not all the way you would expect. I guess one more switch here. Let's put a little bit of red, a lot of green and about halfway on the blue is sort of an aqua or cyan type of color. So it doesn't mix quite. Some of them mix the way you would expect, but some of them not quite so much. So what you would probably do, yeah, if you're doing electronic stuff, you kind of have to do that. That's why I know how I memorize how they mix for actually plugging up multicolored LEDs and building circuits that actually control that wire and happen to develop it that way. What you're most likely going to do is go Google a color picker, or there's an even better one. So, like here, you can search it, or there's lots of them out there. Kind of choose the color you want. So maybe we want a yellowy, something around here. Maybe that shade of yellow, that looks good, and then we can copy it. We'll see those other 4 at the bottom soon. Well, we'll see 3 of those 4. CMYK that's the cyan, magenta, yellow, and the K is either black or clear. That's what K is. Depending on the type of printer, it could be black ink, or it could be one of the ones that actually burn through the laser, in which case we went clear ink in order to get black from the burn mark. But CMYK is the printable version, but we're not really worried about the printable version in here. We want the LED version. So use saturation value, use saturation luminosity, or red, green, blue, and we have multiple options. We will see those soon. Notice the hex color even had on Google even has the little copy button. So you can just copy that, paste it in, and when we reload the page, whoops, did I do something wrong? Oh, I put too many of those. It copied the whole color ready to be, even the little hashtags are ready to be pasted in. Another really useful one, we'll see if it really goes with form inputs, but something I like to do, and I'll go ahead and show it to you. In the HTML, we have lots of elements here. One of the elements that we have is a color picker. So let me add another paragraph here. And inside that paragraph, I'm going to put an input tag with type equal to color. That'll work because we're not submitting it to a form or a script or anything. This is what would normally be on like the input forms that we would submit to a script and do stuff with. But I really like to just put that tag on a page, because then there's a color picker right there on the page. So you can go in here and pick your color and see what it's going to look like next to the other one. And then just delete that at the end. I found that incredibly useful. So we won't see input tags till like week 5 or 6. But that one can be incredibly useful. And since we're looking at colors now, that's something I do all the time, because then once we get it picked, then we just come back and delete that. No problem to come back and delete it afterwards, but it gives us, yeah, our color samples are right on the page instead of somewhere else. And well, it defaults to RGB, but if you hit it looks different in every browser. It will be there in the browser. When you don't expand it, it looks the same in all the browsers, but when you expand it, it's going to look different. Looks like Google is defaulting to RGB. We'll see how to just type in the decimal values soon, because we also have transparency. We'll see that soon. We have a lot more to talk about colors. We're just introducing it today, so y'all can start playing around with this and making things look a little bit better. If you click that little arrow, it switches to the HSL or the hexadecimal, and then you'll just copy the value from there. So that's what I want on.
Out of curiosity, is there a way to get rid of that border so you can more accurately see the color against it?
Yes. Since you asked, we can select the input tags and set the border property equal to none. So like Brady just did, if you have a question, right, if you're thinking that, it's probably because it's something you're gonna do on your final project or something, so feel free to ask immediately. I put plans together, but I don't plan every single minute, and I'm happy to go down rabbit holes. We have time to dive down some rabbit holes, so we can get pretty deep into this stuff. Especially since a lot of people, it's your first semester. So we just use CSS to select the inputs, which that's the only input. So if you had other inputs, that's not the best way if you have lots of inputs there. But since that's our only input, we can just set the border property to none. Or if you have multiple colors, right? Like we want that green closer to our color picker and then that paragraph, you can set the border to that color. Border dash color to whatever the other color page is. But that's just something I found useful over the years, just having those little samples. Kind of like grabbing the samples from Home Depot and then go home and hold them up against the wall or sit them next to your couch and walk around your living room with the sample before you just grab something and start painting. You know, look at how it looks next to all the other stuff. We'll see inputs later, and we'll also get to see how to do more refined selections there. We need more refined selections, right? If I jump over to the other page. Oh, this one doesn't know about the style sheet yet, so we should probably tell the second page about the style sheet. I'm gonna type it again since it's the first day of this. So in the head section, because the style sheet is stuff for the computer, not for the human. The result of the computer going through the style sheet is for the human. So we need a link tag. The relevance of it is the style sheet. The MIME type, or just type, if I can spell. The MIME type is it's Unicode data, so text holding. It's Unicode format, so all the bits going through there are just kind of that's just straight text, but they should be in the order of CSS rules. And then our hyperlink reference to it is it's in the same folder, and it's called first-example.css. And then I'll go ahead and put the little slash there at the end. We already talked about that. Since we know it worked on the first page, it's probably better overall just to copy the one that we know works instead of risking a typo. But since our first day, so there we go. I don't want to put those. Actually, those colors look better next to the beach picture. It looks like sand colors on my screen, maybe not on the TV here.
It looks like cute green on the TV.
Yeah, the blue and the yellow there, that kind of looks nice with the beach, but changing things randomly. So it's like, okay, that's the color we wanted the paragraphs here, but not on the second page. They're all paragraph elements though, right? All these paragraphs, all these paragraphs, we need a better way to identify stuff. So we have more selection options. Okay, if I erase some pictures up here. Oh, we haven't used them in a minute, so. Yeah, that cascading and bubbling thing, I was just telling you that. That's more of a computer science question. Computer scientists worry about optimization, making the code run as good as it possibly can, whereas software developers just worry about making the code run. But I thought you might be curious about that. I'll go ahead and include where the names come from. We don't need to necessarily ignore the questions. So we need a way to identify these things. I labeled it up in my notes. Oh, I didn't label. Okay. So unique identifiers. And I'm going to put quote marks around unique because unique is relative or relatively unique. That's a good label. think I spelled that word wrong, but relatively unique, right? Because we want to refer to all the paragraphs on the second page. So kind of unique, but not each individual one. Our three main ways to do this, three primary ways, are we will either use the class attribute, the name attribute, or the ID attribute. And this, going down this way in this list is more unique. So obviously ID should be unique, right? Like in America, if you try to you're somebody that's 19 years old and has somebody else's ID because it says they're 21, we're in trouble for having that if they get caught with that ID, right? So IDs should be unique. Names, we can have, people can have, multiple people can have the same name, right? If I'm walking around the mall and somebody else, hey Chris, in case I forgot to say, I do go by my first name. Don't worry about formalities or anything. I do just go by my first name. But if I'm walking around the mall and somebody else, hey Chris, I'm probably not even gonna turn and look. Some of y'all might also have a common name the same way. Michael's, Joseph's, Sarah's. There's lots of us in the world, right? Lots of us that have the same name. We're so used, some of us are so used to it that we're not even gonna look unless somebody actually taps us on the shoulder when they yell our name.
You recognize the voice or something.
Yeah, it's so names can be common, but they're still distinct, right? On our roster, none of us had the same name. We all have different names, and class is for grouping things. Class is a large category, like in our society, right? Middle class, lower middle class, middle class, and then upper middle class. So even classes break up into other classes. It's categorization. So categorize things, separate things, or uniquely identify things would be the way to think of it. And in general, I'm going to try to write that really big. In general, we can obviously change this if we want, but the general usage is classes are for CSS, names are for server-side script, and IDs are for client-side scripts. That's the general way we do that. By default, when we get to forms, we won't be doing a lot of processing forms, but the name does get transferred to the server. The name attribute of an input is what gets transferred to the server. The ID is local, so that's for our client-side scripting, the stuff that just quickly changes right there on that end machine, right? Like local changes, so JavaScript, and this one traditionally PHP, but and more just for frameworks. So either ASP pages, which would be C# or Python, or Spring Boot, so Java. Our more well-known programming languages are on the server. Because we don't have write access on the console. That'd be a major security risk, right? If we could visit a web page and they could write files on our computer. So client-side scripting does not have write access. We have to go to a server to write. What else did I put here? Class for CSS, groups with similar things. One tag can have multiple classes, right? Just the way we use that in normal English. Things, and most things fit into more than one category. Names, semi-unique. Things that are connected would share a name. So the difference between a radio button and checkbox. check boxes, usually the square ones, we can select multiple ones and they're separate from each other. But the round ones, radio buttons, we pick one, and if we click on another round button, our selection changes. We would give them all the same name. That's we can only choose one thing with that name. There's 4 things with that name, and when we click on it, the computer just chooses the last one we clicked on. And IDs are just kind of like we use IDs, the unique identifier. That element and only that element. You can take advantage of the fact that the computer doesn't know how to count to ones. You can use IDs on lots of elements. And whenever the computer goes to make a change, it'll just count them all as the same ID. Because the computer doesn't really know how to count to one, but it should be unique. So let's put a couple of those in. They're just attributes though on some of our paragraphs on page 2. So we'll put a class here. So like class equals, I'm gonna make a class called big. Maybe this one, I'll make a class called red, because we haven't seen font sizes yet. I was hoping to get font sizes, but I also want to wrap up around 3 o'clock, which is 10 minutes away. So we might, font sizes will be next Monday, and alternative fonts. Your textbook only covers fonts that are built into your computer already. So I definitely want to show you how to use other fonts, because there are many thousands of fonts out there. I'll make a class called red, and on the 3rd paragraph, I'll use both equals big and red. But we already used the color red, didn't we? I'll stick with it. So then over here, to identify a class, our selector starts with a dot. So like dot big. For that, I will change the font size to 32. And the red class is going to be dot red. So for that, let's change the foreground color to FF0000. So the hexadecimal that is all red and no green, no blue. Our reddest version of red. And then that 3rd class that is in both categories should pick up both of those traits. Do you see the consistencies? Like how everything's spelled out. We give it the property, we'll get to the things. There's a problem with 32. There are lots of ways we can measure this. I'm going to talk about measurements today. Let's go with 32 points. You've probably heard that before. Points, your English teacher would have probably told you to write everything in 12 points. Points go back to the original Gutenberg press. It's 72 points per inch. Pixels are all over the place. We have a unit called pixels. I was going to talk about some of these today. We have a unit called pixels. It hasn't lined up with computers since like the late 1980s, the days of the Apple II, when we had when we could tell what each pixel of the screen was from a distance. Nowadays we have, I can ask this question. You're sitting in front of your computer. Does your computer use screen independent pixels or density independent pixels? So you probably, I see shrugs here in the classroom. You probably don't even know what type of pixel. We have multiple types of pixels on every monitor. So we have a unit called pixels, but that one could be a little bit tricky and inconsistent. Inches, centimeters, new percent. We have lots of sizes. We'll start with points. EMs are actually really nice. It's probably confusing right now. An EM, you may have heard of the EM dash. EM is the size of the largest letter in the font you're using. So usually a capital M or W, which also means the width is different than the height. It's not square. And as you change font, it changes. So in some fonts, an EM would be square. In other ones, it's not. It's inconsistent. But that's one of the old printing one. And That's one of the traditional printing ones, and the really nice thing about that is you're basing the size of the data off of the data, you're using. So EM for, that's the largest element in the font you're using. Take you some getting used to, but you base the sizes that your words show in off of the words you're showing. So there's some nice consistency, and that's one of the ones that's been around for 500 years, like points. 72 points in an inch. We can also do calculations. We'll see that soon.
That's just kind of,
We can say 10% plus 3 pixels is minus 5 points.
so points is just kind of the unit, basically.
Yes, we have lots of.
One to kind of think about what to use, or is that something with the computer that all computers you can reliably figure out?
Difficult to say because better is relative to what you're doing. Point is one of the most common. That's what Microsoft decided to use when they made Word. So that's what English teachers wrote their rules around. Point was from the first Gutenberg press. So printed words for our culture, point is the origin of them because it was in Europe and it was in Europe before the metric system. So everybody had different systems. So they had, they wanted something that would be consistent across all of Europe. When was that? That was 1480s, right?
What?
The original Gutenberg press.
The first press?
Yes, I think it was. I believe that was before expansion outside of Europe, colonization, and all of that stuff. Well known in our well known part of history.
1436.
So it was when Europeans hadn't left Europe yet. I guess like Marco Polo, one or two Europeans left Europe, but they didn't put it on maps. They kept it secret. So points have been around for that long, as well as EM. So like here, this would be an EM. Well, let's see. Lowercase, capital M is the largest one, but a lowercase m would have the right width, and it would have the width of a lowercase m and the height of that D, and it would be that unit size. So whatever words we're actually showing on there, the words we're showing are the basis for the size we're using, and that leads to some consistency in layouts. Sounds odd. We'll use that one a lot this semester, so hopefully it doesn't sound so odd. But another one of the original go back with the printing rules. An EM is the size of the block they use. Right? Has everybody seen the old style printing presses that have a whole bunch of little squares with letters on them? They put in a thing. And EM is the size of that little block with the letter engraved, or not engraved. The opposite of engraved, extruded, with the letter extruded out of it. So the size of that block. So how many EMs can you fit in that slot? And that's how many words you can fit there.
I'd imagine that would also be rather inconsistent because it depends on how large the blocks. And at the time, like,
yeah, larger and smaller blocks. So an EM is the size of the block.
Yeah.
So for purposes, we have to use the PT after the number.
We do have to put a unit. It doesn't have to be PT. Things where I wanted to wrap up at 3. Could be inches. Like, we're Americans, we know inches. I don't like inches.
I think it did. I think that inches is just huge. I think it's 32 inches per letter.
Yes.
If you scroll down, I think you'll see it shot.
Yes. 32 inches per letter. So millimeters might be better.
You liked it a little too well.
We're Americans, but we're aware of the metric system. 32 millimeters might work.
Pretty dang huge.
We can do 32%. We're going to talk about the sizes. I was going to do it today, but we're running out of time. So previewing the sizes, we can do 32% of what the paragraph was going to be on its own.
So 32% of default.
We do have to, so to answer your question, Andrew, we have to have a unit, but we have lots and lots of units. Our textbook for this class doesn't even mention half of the units because there's so many, it's going to be overwhelming. And we're just going to look at a few of them. EM, 32 EM is huge. That's like 32. That's going to be like inches again.
Smaller.
not quite like inches.
Inches was way more, like you could bear, like the U was way multiple pages, so.
Points are probably what you're used to from Microsoft Word and or Google Docs. And since I feel it's safe to assume everybody is typing up a document in our society, that's probably a good starting point. That's going to be the one that's always it's more like intuitive to you.
I do find it interesting that with the example of big red and big red, you put any commas or periods.
Space delimit there.
Spaces. The
We will see where commas go. Commas mean something to both languages. So we will see the space delimit the multiple classes. And real quick, we need an ID. I'll put the ID in there. Article of page 2. We could do a selector, but this is our primary things. ID equals random stuff. I'm gonna call it random. No, maybe not random. ID equals paragraphs. Spell out the P like we have in paragraph tag. So then to refer to that, we use that symbol with many names again. Pound symbol, number sign, hashtag, whatever you want to call that symbol. And then the ID you put in. ID you put in. Paragraphs and let's do a background color to tie it together. Background color. Oh, I can do this. If there's equal amount of red, green, and blue, it is it's a grayscale. So all zeros, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, none of them are turned on, that's black. On the other end of the spectrum, all F's, FF, every one of our switches is turned on to one, turned to one. Right? Kind of like we turn on a light switch, it's on really bright. Everything on is white. And if there's equal amounts of red, green, and blue, that's a gray. So 88, 88, 88, which there's a shortcut for, we'll see before long, is the gray right in the middle. And if we get closer to the whites, A2, 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 that's going to be a nice light gray. And obviously, closer to the blacks, closer to all zeros, would be a darker gray. That can be a useful one to pick because it's kind of hard to pick the grays on those color pickers, right? We go over to the color picker and there's a bunch of gray there, but it's kind of hard to say what's like perfectly gray and doesn't have any yellow in it in this case versus over here what's perfectly gray and doesn't have any blue in it. So that's a good one to type. If equal amounts red, green, and blue is going to give you a gray. That gives a couple things to start playing with, right? You can start adding some colors, experimenting with different color pickers, selecting that, and maybe start getting a basic feel for how to put this together. If you haven't looked at the homework yet, the homework's following along examples, so they're like, okay, type this on line 19 or something. That's what the statewide course shell is doing. I like to be consistent with the statewide LV for when you all get into other classes, but you'll want to just play around with stuff. Have some files that you can just randomly do stuff to see what happens. And remember our official reference. This is the big one. There's the CSS reference, the official one on w3sites.com. We will see the best one soon. When we get to Flex and Grid, Flex containers and grids is when we will look at the best one. But somewhere there should be a CSS reference. That's tutorials. I don't want the tutorial. Advanced responsive grid examples reference there. You go down to scroll down to CSS reference, you'll just see a big long list of properties, which is probably going to overwhelm you. So a better place to start. That's our official one. You don't know how to Google, so just search for make something yellow and CSS. We already saw that, but you don't know how to Google searches. In our textbook, the appendices at the back have a shorter list of properties, which might be a better starting point. Then you're not going to get overwhelmed by seeing all the properties because CSS has been building for a while. There are a lot of properties there. It's a huge, long, overwhelming list, and we probably don't need those big, long, overwhelming lists at this point.
There's probably like a bunch of ways to do the exact same thing, more or less.
Not in HTML and CSS. They standardize it. There is, but you have to code it yourself and tell the browser how to do it. But that's where the standardization is. So there's one way to do it, and everybody does it the same way. And then you can look at somebody else's style sheet, figure out what they did, and on it, and adjust what they used. So this is the place in programming where there's not quite so many ways to do it. The combinations will have different results. There's different combinations that we can put together. Sorry, I should say that. They limit the properties. Properties are standardized, so there's not different properties that would do the same thing. But we could put together different combinations of properties to get the same final result. We will see that a lot when we get to positions. When we get to laying things out on the page, whether it's in the upper right or upper left, lower right, center of the page. When we get to that part, we will see a lot of it.
Everybody's have the same basic components, but sometimes you can slap them together two different ways to get the same result.
What, an index?
More or less.
Yes. I thought there was an appendix here. Where is the appendix? In the printed version, there's an appendix.
I would think it would be the index.
It has a list of HTML properties. I thought I pulled it up on the book before, and actually now that I say that, I'm having trouble finding it in the ebook. There it is. So you actually have to go to the table of contents and scroll down, and then there's the HTML5 quick reference and CSS property. So this might be a better property one to get started with as you play around with things this weekend. But we will talk about a lot of things. Start by just adding some basic colors and stuff. Get some used to that, and we will talk about all the things in detail, see what each one does, and we'll go beyond what the book does. We can also animate things with CSS, make them responsive, and there's more we can do. We'll go beyond what the book does in class. We have a lot to see on that. But does anybody have any questions about that right now?
So comparing the three primary of class name ID, if they're the board versus what we did, the class equals that is the same thing as the class there.
Yes.
And we did the ID, which is the hashtag thing. What about the name?
That one's more complicated. We will see that. It's more complicated. I was gonna subtly skip over that and come back to that. We have to get the name, we have to identify by attribute, right? We have all kinds of attributes in our page, right? Like, or something with an attribute. I thought there was. You're not putting any other? So we could search for things with a height of 90 pixels.
And that's everything with a height of 90 pixels. That's the name we are identifying by.
Yeah, so we would look for a name just like we would for an image with a height attribute.
Okay.
So that one gets a little more complicated. We will see that soon though, but yeah, we have a lot of stuff about CSS still to see.
So is it also complicated in terms of, let's say we want to differentiate the color, page 1 and page 2, that the paragraph. Same color right now, is that hard to say I don't want those colors on page 2. I just want it on blank.
The most common way to do that would be to make like a page 1 class. Or you could, right, we only have 2 pages, so maybe you had 10 pages. And you just want page 1 different. You would do the style sheet would have what goes on the other 9, and then you do an embedded style sheet. That style tag, and put that on the first page just to override it in the one spot. So a couple options on how to do that. Do that is, my first thought when you asked from your question is that's the perfect example for a class. Make a page 1 class and a page 2 class, and then you can have different rules.
Another example of same basic tools and components, but you can assemble them in different ways to do the exact same.
Yes, and there's remember the style sheet is what ties our website together, right? Like I just went to infinityfree.com, and no matter where I click on this, the pages are probably all pulling from the same style sheet. That way you can tell I'm on the right page versus over on Ivy Learn. No matter where I click on Ivy Learn, they're pulling from the same style sheet. So I know I'm still looking at the same website. Versus here, right, if I go down to the Ivy Plus link and click this, I can, when it loads, I'll immediately be able to see that I'm no longer on something that has the same style sheet. So even if I hadn't opened in a new tab, that's how we know we went to a different website, right? So usually our website just has one style sheet. We'll have lots of HTML, and this has lots of JavaScript, but one style sheet to tie everything together. I'm going to upload this to the hosting site if I can remember which one it is. There it is. Go to File Manager. And
Is there a way to just update this, or if you have to delete and re-upload?
Yeah, I was going to re-upload.
Okay.
So I'm going to go in that folder and upload files. I'm doing one at a time. So we didn't change the image. The style sheet's new, so bring that up. And I'll upload index page. Do you want to replace or keep it? So I'm going to upload in. I want the new version. Yeah, so the normal thing when you copy files over. Probably don't check that box so you have to scroll every single time.
In case you accidentally do the
But other situations you might want to do it every single time. And if you get errors, remember we are on a free domain hosting site. If you're trying to upload things and something's wrong on another end, that will not count against you. Just let me know. Like things aren't going there, haven't finished, and it's not going to count on like late penalties or anything like that because I know we're using a free domain hosting site. It goes down sometimes. Some people have already seen it. They see errors. The discussion board this week is to go do a Google search for free domain hosting sites. So that if it is down, you can just maybe upload to your backup option and then send both links to your submission. And then hopefully one of them will work. Right? And now index. Oh, we need to change our table. Oh, I'm done. You change the table of contents, do we? In class, right? Still our first example, but now we have the style sheet on it. All of those things we saw, go to the other page, and we already saw that, so hopefully no surprises.
For our case studies for chapter 2 and 3, we're gonna upload them into the site.
Yeah, so you'll just upload them and then send me the link to it.
Case study.
Chapter 2 and 3 homework. You build a website.
Okay.
That's the first page, and then like next week, chapter 4 and 5 build off of the chapter 2 and 3. So we're basically spending the whole semester. The book just keeps building on the same one, which is kind of nice. Any other questions? I'm at the end a few minutes ago, so we're starting to play around with that now that we've seen something we can actually do. Start messing with colors, like try not quite randomly, but pay attention to the hexadecimal colors and see what the mix looks like. And yeah, I guess just click around and get familiar with stuff. We have a whole lot of stuff still to see this semester. We will spend a lot more time on CSS than HTML. There's a lot of stuff still to see on CSS, so that's just the first preview of it. That was 5 seconds, that should have been time to unmute if anybody had a question. If you have any, let me know, I'm always happy to help. On Monday, I got a bunch of, several messages came in while I'm in my night, evening class, I also teach a 6 to 9:50 class. Yeah, SDEV 220 class runs tonight, so, and I'm constantly happy to go to meetings. So when you get hold of me, I will get back to you as soon as I can, but, I'm not in class or no meeting or, yeah, I will always get back as soon as I possibly can. The, yeah, I told you all the first day of the How you learn inbox and text messages. So basically communication from you all are the only noises, only things that make noise on my phone. Everything else has to wait until I see it. Y'all have a great weekend. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll see you on Monday.